Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I used my experience from working as a nurse for 47 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We're both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions when a crisis hits. Also, this podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Welcome to this week's show. We're so glad to have you join Charlie and me for the next hour as we talk about the murder of a child. This podcast is a combination of education and entertainment. Edutainment, if we're going to make up words, delivered in 3 halves. Our main topic is in the second half, and you can fast forward to that yak-free zone if you'd like. In the first half, I have the recipe of the week and a story about New Hampshire's state motto, live free or die. In the second half, Charlie's going to talk about the death of his son, Michael, who was shot 5 years ago today in New York City. And in the third half, I have the story and lyrics to Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven. We are tripping out on the road to New Hampshire, home of granite mountains, foaming ocean, and the serial killer Herman Webster Mudgett from Gilmartin, New Hampshire, who confessed to 27 murders. But what New Hampshire takes considerable pride in is its memorable state motto, live free or die. The New Hampshire motto originated in a letter written by General John Stark on July 31, 1809. Stark was a New Hampshire-born war hero who served as an officer in the British Army during the French and Indian War and a major general in the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Stark led troops at the Battle of Bunker Hill and later at the Battle of Bennington, where a strategic victory earned him the nickname the Hero of Bennington. 32 years later, Stark, then in failing health, was invited to a reunion of the Battle of Bennington veterans, but he was not well enough to travel. He sent a letter instead saying that he'd never forget the troops he commanded in Bennington. Quote, there were men that had not learned the art of submission, nor had they been trained in the art of war, but an astonishing success taught the enemies of liberty that undisciplined freemen are superior to veteran slaves. End quote. As an afterword to the letter, Stark included a brief passage to be read as a toast to the veterans. Quote, live free or die. Death is not the greatest of evils. End quote. Some perceive New Hampshire's motto as severe, but it fits the fierce independence of the Granite State. Live free or die. And everyone dies. And a trip to New Hampshire would not be complete without trying poutine. The French word poutine is slang for a mess. And a mess this food is. Natives with a strong French-Canadian heritage, especially near Manchester, or if you live in Manchester and you know any of the older French Canadians, they would say, Manchester, carry a gravy-slathered torch for this iconic cheesy French fry combination. This dish, offered as a basic recipe in many bars around town, is a warm combination of rich gravy, mild, slightly squeaky, melty cheese, and fries, making it a comforting, satisfying, and indulging experience. Don't obsess about getting the fries super crispy because you're just going to add gravy and then they're going to soften. I think this would be a better dish to comfort someone who's grieving rather than bring to a funeral lunch, but I'm not going to dictate where you take your poutine. Bon appétit! Please go to our website for this week's recipe and additional resources for this program. Everyone Dies is offered at no cost, but it's not free to produce. Can we count on you to contribute? Your tax-deductible gift would go directly to supporting our nonprofit journalism so that we can remain accessible to everyone. You could donate at www.everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, the number one dies.org, or at our site on Patreon under Everyone Dies. Charlie?
Longtime listeners know that my son Michael was murdered. It's been 5 years. He was murdered about 3 months after my mother died. During her funeral mass, immediate family members sat in the front pew. We all sat and stood for about an hour. Michael and I were on opposite ends of the row, occasionally making eye contact. During one glance, he shook his head no, as if to say, never again. As soon as the service ended, he pulled me aside to say he would not hold a church ceremony for me. Not always known for his sensitivity, I reminded Junior that my mother was recently dead, that these rituals were important to the living, and that his grandmother would have liked the Mass. I never told him she was not the best of mothers. We eventually made peace and enjoyed each other's company over the last several years of her life, when I learned to accept her not so much as my mother, but as a flawed human she was. Early stages of dementia began to seep in a year or so before she died. My mother, not me. She did not always immediately recognize her firstborn when I would visit. Often, I saw her trying to remember who I was. However, as soon as I said Michael wanted me to give her a big hug and apologize for not visiting with me, he was in his first year of nursing school, she immediately smiled and would pretend to talk to him in the same baby voice she used when he was a baby. I live in New York City, and the flight to Michigan is short. One day my sister called to tell me the old girl was suddenly deteriorating quickly. My cousins picked me up at Detroit Metro Airport. In the car, I phoned the nursing home. My brother told me she was going fast, but that she was waiting for me. I told him to put the phone on speaker and hold it next to her ear. She was not quite unconscious, and her breathing was shallow, common at the end of life as a body shuts down. I told her not to die yet, that I would be there soon, that she owed me. She hung on. We all said our goodbyes. I was the last one to leave, telling her that I loved her, admitting that the pina coladas my sister and I would bring did have rum when we assured her it was virgin, which made her blush, and that it was time for her to be with her mother, who had died when my mom was 5 years old, and not understanding why her mother was suddenly gone, surrounded by her father and brothers who offered her no support. That trauma followed her for the rest of her life. I left her room and she died a few hours later. And here's where you might want to take notes. Marianne pointed out later that, though unconscious, my mom was cognizant of my presence, as is the case with many people at the very end of their life, since hearing is the last sense to go. I told myself I left too soon. I still have occasional moments when I feel I let her down and that I had left her to die alone. I pointed out to Michael after the Mass that the day was not about him, so some empathy was called for. He was close to both his grandparents, especially my mother, so his snarkiness might have been his way of processing her death. He asked me what I wanted when I died. Since his mother and I were divorcing, I told him that unless I had a partner, the decision would be his when I shuffled off this mortal coil. Hamlet. Look it up. I'd be dead, so what would I care? If there were someone else in my life, he would have to make decisions with her, but not to worry since I would have prepared all the necessary documents. And, as a reminder, have all your advanced care directives, proxy, and a living will, plus your trusts, unpaid bills, access to your finances, etc. in order, while you can speak for yourself. Otherwise, someone might make decisions for you you would never have made for yourself. I also told him that my driver's license stated that I was an organ donor and suggested he do the same on his license to help others in need of healthy organs. I told him he would just have to go to the DMV to make this update. He said it was not worth the wait in line. So, when my only child, was in ICU, kept alive by a machine that was breathing for him because his body had shut down when the bullet went through his neck, hitting the base of his brain in such a way that he was clinically dead a few minutes later, I told the nurse to take his very healthy organs. Michael was 21 when he was murdered, about 3 weeks shy of 22. The next day, his mother, understandably upset, told the staff they would never butcher him and take his organs. She told me this, and I told her to piss off and to think past her own grief and allow his life to save others. She had a few choice words of her own. The next day, his mother called to say that a doctor had later told her that Michael's driver's license listed him as an organ donor, and per his wishes, the hospital would take their cut, or cuts, as per his instructions. More startling, he had actually listened to me. I was with him alone in his room when it was time to pull the plug. I don't remember all I said, but I did read Green Eggs and Ham to him, one of his favorites. I thanked him on behalf of the 8 people who would have new organs and a chance at a full life. I also reminded him he still owed me the $15 I'd lent him. His body twitched on occasion. I had asked Marianne if I was killing my brain dead child by turning off the machine. She gently explained that the twitch was a natural reaction of the body, and there was a reflexive action, that he was in no pain. I kissed his forehead and wished him well at his next journey. For a while, I told myself that I had killed him by flipping the switch. Intellectually, I knew that was not true. While emotions rule, I eventually got past that thought. Mostly. Michael would never want to be in a vegetative state. That night, his body was transferred to Bellevue Hospital on the east side of Manhattan. On the same street, First Avenue, about a block up, is New York University Medical Center, where he had been born. His mother called me the following morning to say his organs had been harvested, and his heart had just been transplanted into a gravely ill 20-year-old whose parents wanted to meet me and say thank you. I said, no, not me. I could not imagine 8 people telling me how wonderful, etc., my son was, as if he had made a choice. Nothing wonderful about a random bullet. I don't want to remember, but I can't forget. I'd kill for that.
Eric Clapton wrote Tears in Heaven in 1992, 1 year after the death of his 4-year-old son. On March 20th, 1991, his son fell from a 53-story window of an apartment in New York City, belonging to a friend of his boy's mother, Lori Del Santo. After the 4-year-old Connor died, Clapton went into seclusion for an extended amount of time. Eventually, he returned to songwriting and wrote one of the saddest, most heartbreaking songs. Here are the lyrics. Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would you be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stand if I saw you in heaven? I'll find my way through night and day, 'cause I know I just can't stay here in heaven. Time can bring you down. Time can bend your knees. Time can break your heart. Having you begging, please, begging, please. Beyond the door, there's peace, I'm sure, 'cause I know there'll be no more tears in heaven. Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would you be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on. 'Cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. 'Cause I know I don't belong here in heaven.
Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete. And from the ending of Hamlet, good night, sweet prince.
And I'm Marianne Matzo. And we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.